O Lumen Ecclesiae, Doctor Veritatis, O Teacher of Truth, O Light of the Church. With these words, we daily invoke the aid of our Holy Father, St. Dominic. I remember, as a novice, many years ago, Father Fancy Moran telling us that the light on St. Dominic's forehead, the star, was still shining. And as I look around us this evening, it is easy to believe in what Father Fancy used to say. The example and the vision of St. Dominic continues to inspire and encourage us in our Dominican way of life. To see so many of the younger brethren still being inspired by St. Dominic and his brethren through the centuries gives all of us heart and renews us all. But it is a gift which needs to be cared for and harnessed. Having listened to Pope Benedict these last days in Britain, we hear his call that the light of the gospel must be placed in the public marketplace. This call renews us all in our Dominican vocation. The light must be placed on a lampstand, not hidden from public view. And surely this is our wonderful Dominican calling. However, if this light is to shine brightly, this evening's gospel warns us that we have to be very careful how we hear what we are to preach. So take care, Jesus says, how you hear. I think these words are very important for us as we begin our new academic year together. For our study and our learning will take place in a hidden way, not because we are stupid and no one will ever guess that we have read a book, but rather because the activity of our study is a very personal thing to each one of us. How I hear what I am being taught is a very important component of how I learn. St. Thomas would teach us quid recipitur, ad modus recipientis recipitur. So I want to spend a little time this evening thinking of how we receive that which we study. How are you going to hear what you study this year? How are you prepared to listen to what is set before you? Are you willing to hear? In his speech to both Houses of Parliament last Friday, the Pope made reference to the role which faith can play in society, and there has been much press comment on this aspect. But he also had something to say of the role which reason should play in religion. I quote the Holy Father, "This corrective role of religion vis-a-vis reason is not always welcomed, though partly because distorted forms of religion, such as sectarianism and fundamentalism, can be seen to create serious social problems themselves. And in turn, these distortions of religion arise when insufficient attention is given to the purifying and structuring role of reason within religion." It is a two-way process. That is why I would suggest that the world of reason and the world of faith, the world of secular rationality and the world of religious belief, need one another and should not be afraid to enter into a profound and ongoing dialogue for the good of our civilization. Surely, my brothers and sisters, these words encourage us in our study. The role which intellectual discovery, as faith-seeking understanding, impels us to take our studies more seriously. Without the rigor of intellectual reasoning, our religion could decay into sectarianism or fundamentalism. So we enter into this dialogue of faith and reason in our study in order to know the truth. We have nothing to fear from this dialogue. So dear brothers, don't be afraid to think, to critique, to wonder, to read, to be questioned. Our searching needs the purifying and structuring role of reason. If we give ourselves in humility to the search for truth, then the words of this evening's gospel will indeed be realized. For anyone who has will be given more. You are here eager to learn. You have a desire to preach to your peers. These are blessed gifts given to you by God for his church. And our common task as a teaching community, as a formation community, is to see these gifts develop. This brings me to the importance of our study as a group, as our lifestyle has been developed in the order to aid our hearing, to aid our listening. To quote again from the Pope's speech, but this time in Hyde Park last Saturday. Speaking of Newman, he said, "Newman teaches us that if we have accepted the truth of Christ and committed our lives to him, there can be no separation between what we believe and the way we live our lives. Our every thought, word and action must be directed to the glory of God and the spread of the kingdom." Newman saw clearly that we do not so much accept the truth in a purely intellectual act as embrace it in a spiritual dynamic that penetrates to the core of our being. Truth is passed on not merely by formal teaching, important as that is, but also by the witness of lives lived in integrity, fidelity, and holiness. Those who live in and by the truth instinctively recognize what is false, and precisely as false, inimical to the beauty and goodness which accompany the splendor of truth, veritatis splendor. Now this places before us a challenging vision of what it means to be a group of religious brothers living together with a common purpose within an encouraging environment of true holiness. Ours is the challenge to say what it means to be a Dominican house of studies in the Ireland of the 21st century. Not simply about going to class, but about living the gospel. The discipline of our lives as we endeavour to balance the needs of the apostolate, our prayer time, our study time, time together in community and relaxation, and the physical exercises must all be worked at every day to arrive at the beauty of our Dominican life. There is a way of living as Dominicans which has developed over the centuries to help us to listen so that we can preach. The discipline of silence in the house, encouraging an atmosphere of prayer and study. The discipline of sitting at one's desk and being productively employed. All of these are well respected in our Dominican way of life. All are there to aid our hearing the word, so that what we already possess may be blessed and flourish. Together let us discover how to be faithful to what the tradition of the order has handed on to us, not as slaves to some archaic system, not because we want to be curators of a museum, but because we can learn from the wisdom of the ancients. This wisdom, this tradition of study in a common lifestyle, is for us to mould into the 21st century. My dearest brothers and sisters, a sacred torch is being passed on to a new generation, and we are equal to that challenge if we listen carefully, so that the secret, the living tradition, the tradition of the church can be made clear and be brought into the light. The Holy Father says, Newman's life also teaches us that the passion for the truth, intellectual honesty, and genuine conversion are costly. The truth that sets us free cannot be kept to ourselves. It calls for testimony. It begs to be heard. And in the end, its convincing power comes from itself and not from the human eloquence of arguments in which it may be couched. He then went on to speak about the wonderful example of the martyrs of London and Tyre. And then he says, in our own time, the price to be paid for fidelity to the gospel is no longer being hanged, drawn and quartered, but it often involves being dismissed out of hand and ridiculed. And yet, the church cannot withdraw from the task of proclaiming Christ and his gospel as saving truth, the source of our ultimate happiness as individuals, and the foundation of a just and humane society. This light of truth, this preaching of the gospel, must be placed on the lampstand so that all may come into the light. This is the challenge that we face as Dominicans in the 21st century. How can we allow this light to shine brightly? This is a challenging task, but it is one that we are now accepting by our willingness to hear and to listen and to study. Our listening and our hearing, our study, is already our response to the need for the truth to shine forth in Irish society. What we do at our desk, in the classroom, in the library, on our knees in prayer, in the sacred liturgy in praise, are our Dominican ways of hearing, which allow us to become preachers of the gospel. The task before you and I, my brothers and sisters, is how are we to hear this year? How willing are you to hear the word spoken, the word read, the word encountered in our own personal encounter with Christ? So I say to you, take care how you hear this academic year.